welcome to Co-Parenting Confessions. I am your host, Alysha Price. And before we get started, what do you have to do? Subscribe and like. So please subscribe right now before we get started because you are not going to want to miss another episode of Co-Parenting Confessions. Now, today I have a really special guest because if you've been watching Co-Parenting Confessions, you know that I'm single. And so I am really interested in talking about dating and what the dating landscape looks like for those of us who are co-parenting and consider ourselves single parents. So today I have Alex Merritt, the love engineer, on the show. I am so excited. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I am excited, one, because I have been watching your work for a while. I see you locally getting your love on and helping everybody, change the way they're thinking about love. And so it just felt so on time and so right to be talking about what does that look like for co-parents and for single parents. And so on social media lately, I've been seeing some stuff. And so I want to dive in and talk about it. But first, I would love for you to share a little bit about how you got into this work. I know you're a mechanical engineer.
Yes.
And now you're working on the heart and people's minds. So tell me a little bit about what the love engineer is, why you're doing the work. What do we need to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, that you're right, I'm a mechanical engineer and was doing mechanical engineering the way mechanical engineers do it, but then quickly realized, actually in college, so my college roommate was a guy.
Okay.
The whole time. And we would have some of the same arguments and challenges with whether or not who take out the trash, the dishes not being done right, all that stuff. And I realized somewhere along the way, I was like, wait a minute, he and I are having this same argument and we are not married. But it was the same ones that my married friends were having. I was like, wait, this isn't marital status. This is gender dynamics.
Okay.
And so taking this engineering mind, my own questions about love and relationships and what did I need to do to love and be loved, and quickly realized that this path of learning how to build great relationships, none of us had. But yet it's learnable, no different than any of the other engineering principles. And I wanted to learn it for myself. Once I did, then I was like, wait, other people need to learn this too, because again, it's not marital status, it's gender dynamics.
Yes. I love that you say that because it puts so much in perspective. And a big thing for me about co-parenting, so I will start by saying, I despise being called a single mother. It's a thing for me. Because I feel like there's a lot of negative connotation that comes with it. There's a lot of stereotypes. And raising a young Black man, it felt really important to me to not lead with that so that people would know his father was in his life.
That's good.
And so me saying that I'm a single mother would give people the impression that he didn't have the right type of support that he needed. So I would always say I am a co-parent and I'm a single woman.
Yeah.
I would make that clear. So I want to dive into even that, like when you feel like saying you're a single mom, what that might do when you're trying to date or when you're trying to look for love, when you've come from this space of like what I thought was going to happen or how I thought my family life would be is no longer my reality. Yeah. And you're feeling a little bruised. So how do people move to that, whole and well space?
Yeah, I think that's the first part is recognizing that, right? So oftentimes in our dating fantasies, the, make believe of marriage, as I like to call it, it often doesn't play out the way we anticipate.
Never.
It, believe it or not, because as I say all the time, it's like you're dating your imagination and that is not real. And you're, like I said, married to make believe. And so therefore that doesn't play out. So half of it is recognizing that what I believe to be true may not be real. And being okay with that, because as I talk about learning to love, which is why as a love engineer, mine is all about design, build, maintain great relationships. And it's an intentional process versus borrowing from your favorite fantasies and hoping the person in front of you lives up to it, which they don't even know you have.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's so real because the same thing happens in family, right? We make up what we want our families to look like. We have this ideation, kind of this ideology, I should say, in your brain about what family is supposed to look like. And then when people don't live up to that,
you're disappointed.
Very disappointed. And for some people, it all goes to hell in a handbasket.
Quickly.
So I would love, as I'm sitting here right now, I'm feeling like this vibe of like, let's talk for two single mothers who want to be dating and are unaware of the things that they're doing to block that love or that blessing of having that wholeness, that relationship that they're seeking. What in your work do you see or have you heard that as an expert lets you know, oh, this is what, I can say a kind of a majority of women are doing that's kind of blocking their blessings?
Yeah, there's quite a few of them, obviously. And so one of them is it's the fear factor. Like there is nothing more creative in this space than fear that masquerades itself as being smart. Fear that masquerades itself as being responsible.
Okay.
Right? Because, there's no, if there's ever a group of people that are super responsible, it is moms. And they are dutiful about that. And then fear masquerading itself as protection. But it's really
Like
isolation. Exactly.
Yep,
so the pretense of that, I got these boundaries again, which reinforces the idea that I'm smart, which reinforces this idea that I'm responsible. You bundle those all together. And then what you actually have is a woman who is blocking love unintentionally in the name of being a good mother.
And you know what I noticed too, and I feel like this hasn't been my personal experience, but I feel like I've seen this quite a bit, is when you're talking about like acting as if you're so smart, you're one step ahead, you're super responsible, you have these boundaries up, and then you masquerade all of that as standards.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, no, those are just my standards.
These are just my standards. These are just my values. I just have high standards. I won't settle. Any version of that. And that's usually the one I can usually pick up with any of the smart, ambitious women. Because I am very specific about who I coach and who I work with. And they're all smart, ambitious women. For a reason, like I said, one, because smart women tend to not only believe they're smart, what they don't say out loud is they believe they're smarter than everybody else. That's the part that is unspoken. And with that energy, then dating becomes a game of not opening myself up to love, but to see if I can't catch you playing your games. And if I can catch it, then I feel good about it, actually. And not even realize that, again, they're creating a relationship reality for themselves that will require them to be disappointed, that'll require them to be unsupported, that'll require them to be unloved. But then they'll have a really cool story to put on social media.
Right. Like I'm manifesting this behavior. If you're seeking that, you're talking about it all the time. You're waiting for the, one shoe to drop. The gotcha moment. Yeah. You're going to get it.
You will find it every time. And there's an abundance of it.
Yes.
Equally, there's an abundance of great partners who are willing, ready, excited, able to partner with you as well. Like, so that both of those exist. It just depends on which world you choose to come from. And so that's one of the things that I see single women particularly do. Like it's this badge of honor almost of proving that I'm right about how awful men are. And it's like, you are correct. You are right.
You know what else I cannot stand? And this is probably off topic and we'll get back on topic. But I can't stand that when there are single mothers that do that, so much so that they claim to celebrate Father's Day even. Right? Like men are just so off. They're just so wrong. They're so unneeded that now when it's Father's Day or when it's a time to celebrate him, no, I'm the mother and the father type of a thing. Drives me nuts.
Yeah, because it's delusional at best.
I digress, but
it's delusional. And it, like I said, but it reinforces, and I think that's the message for anybody listening. It's like you will have what you say, whether you want it or not.
Yes. That is so real.
You will have it. It's yours. And so that's why, again, I don't spend any energy every time. It's like, I don't convince people of anything. I present a perspective and your option is to opt in or opt out. Yeah. But you believe you and whatever you say is the reality you are creating.
Yep. So good. So good. And, the same is with, the co-parenting dynamic, and a big part when I talk to people about co-parenting, especially moms that will say, I can't co-parent with this person. He is impossible. I don't, or I might not feel safe around him or whatever, no matter how big or small the situation might be. And they just denounce co-parenting, right? Okay, no problem. But then I will say to them, are you never going to get married? Are you never going to date? Are you, because then you have to start to think about, it may not be with the biological parent, but if you are in a relationship with someone, they surely are going to show up as a co-parent in some form of fashion. And especially if they're in the same household with you. Right. So acting as if you will never want to learn what it looks like to partner with someone on raising your children, it just sets you up for, failure, or to be kind of in this space continuously of feeling this resentment of never having male support.
But also what's not spoken about is how much of a payoff that is. Victimhood comes with its own payoffs.
Absolutely.
And people support that. And the idea of it's often seen as safer. So for as much as people can complain about being single or single parenting, because again, it's not even just in single parents, right? Single people play that game too, but it's this notion that somehow it is actually safer. And on some levels, it is, because it allows you to control your environment. And even if nothing else, allows you to control the story you were telling yourself about what's going on in the environment, which doesn't challenge you on anything.
That's real. Because it's so much easier to be, and people will argue, I know they will argue with me about this, but it's so much easier to be a single mother than it is to co-parent. You don't have to consider the other person. You don't have anyone that you're, negotiating with about rules, values, anything. Bedtimes, I don't care what it is. You get to make up what you want to be done.
And that's the standard.
And that's where it ends. Right?
It's a fact. That is a fact. And many people, like I said, when I talk about the payoff, people don't want to admit to that. Is that like I said, the payoff is big. And I say it all the time. It's like, look at your life. And if there's something in it you don't want, then ask yourself, what benefit am I getting for it being this way?
Absolutely.
Because if it is this way and it has been this way, it's like the truth is I want this more than I want whatever I'm talking about.
Thank you. Like, I want to sit in this bullshit more than I want to feel, like I'm relieved of it. Like, I can move into this new life and have a new narrative.
Because I don't even trust that it's relief. That's the problem. Is that the belief that it's a relief to have a partner is not representative of most people's experience.
How much do you see that being because of women not having had their father in their life?
I know it's an easy cop, but the truth of the matter is a lot of women with fathers in their lives have the same struggle and challenge, because as we know, all fathers are not created equal. And it's less about that, because again, that our parent generation, they had less skills than anybody, right? And so it's not a matter of if they were there or not there. It's really what message did they get from that? Because I will tell you, I know women who had the best father on paper. But if you talk to that woman about the experience with her dad, you'd have thought he was the worst man that ever walked the earth. And so it's not the presence of, it's just the reality that our parents are our parents. They did what they knew. Some of it was great. Much of it might have been not great. Either way, it is done. And at this point in life, the adult in you have to parent that kid that was there.
Yes, has to stand up.
And take it over at this point, because again, no, whether you had a great father, an absent father, lukewarm father, so whatever kind of, that's what you had. Now,
right.
What do I learn and where am I going from this? Because sitting in the space of blaming, and I was there for a long time, I'll be honest, like I grew up in foster care, was adopted, the whole nine, and could tell you a million things that my dad didn't do, and he didn't come to this, and da-da-da-da. And it's like, okay, got it. All of that is true. Hurt my heart. So it's like feel, and I think that's probably the bigger message I think I had to learn is feel the way you should have felt about it. Because there were many times where I was like, oh no, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me. It didn't bother me. And it's like, well, that emotion went somewhere.
Absolutely.
And now it's showing up in this angry approach to men, this defensiveness with partners or anybody. You can't nobody tell me what to do now because the man that I wanted to instruct me didn't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now is realizing that if you just sit with that emotion, cry, do whatever you got to do, feel that way, because that little girl deserved that.
Yeah.
She did.
Yeah. That's so good. You know, so I grew up with my father. I'm very close with my father, right? And I will hear a lot of men say things, you know, to that point about, oh, well, you know, she may have daddy issues, you know, and now she doesn't have her children's father with her. And so now this is compounded. And so stay away, far away from this woman with all this trauma, because everybody wants to make sure you're fixed, right, before you're in a relationship. So she looks like she's got, you know, red flags all around her and all this trauma. Don't do it. And I love that you mentioned it doesn't matter whether a person's father was there or not there, because I would say in my own personal experience, because my father is very much in my life, it has been a block or a deterrent, because there's a I'm not taking no shit type of a mentality that comes with me because of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Having that man. So it can be for people who are thinking, you know, single moms that are, you know, repeating kind of this generational cycle, stay away from them because this is traumatic, to just let that go, right?
All of it.
Right?
Because everybody has something. And to your point, like I said, for every great woman I know that had a phenomenal father, that woman, when it comes to men, has a different challenge. And the challenge is that there's no man that she's ever met that's going to live up to him.
Yep.
Because in her mind, her father is like Jesus Christ, and every man she meets is less than that.
Yeah.
So it creates a different dynamic. So I say all of that to realize that, again, whatever barrier you've used to create the barrier, recognize that and take the barrier down, because that's what you're blocking. You're blocking love and great relationships, no matter what, right? Or because there's many dads who teach their children, like he needs to be, do the same thing for me that I do for you. First of all, fathers, stop telling your daughters that, because it sets her up. Because one, there is no man that's going to treat her like her dad does. Why? Because he's not her dad.
Right.
Secondly, it's a little weird to suggest that a man is going to treat your daughter like you treat your daughter. And mind you, I mean, we're going to just add in the fact that he's sleeping with her. So let's just start there. That is fundamentally different.
Yeah.
And the things that a dad wants from a daughter are really different than the things that a man wants from his woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so dads don't set up their daughters to be great partners. And therefore those women get with men. And it's like, why doesn't he not treat me like my daddy? And it's like, because your daddy dealt with a lot of your nonsense because he was your dad.
Yes. That's
your man.
Well. That could be,
under no conditions.
Yep. So this just popped in my head. It's hilarious. And I started to write this in the foreword of my book. And then when I shifted what my book was going to be about. Because initially when I was writing, I thought I need to tell this crazy ass story about how I became a co-parent.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start at the early, ages and stages of the fact that I was raised by co-parents. My parents were never married. And then I grew up and repeated a very similar cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
Sounds good.
And so when I was doing this work, trying to figure out what's going to be in this book, what will help people, I remember writing that my dad told me when I would choose a person to have a child with, that person should be my friend. And he put this emphasis on the foundation of the relationship being a friendship, and how very important that was. And that was messaging that was embedded in me, right?
Yeah.
Then there was also this messaging about, I don't care what you decide to do, but you got to go to college.
Yeah.
You have no choice. You can pick what you learn, but your ass is going to college. So those were these two things, right? So lo and behold, I go and get pregnant by my childhood friend since the 4th grade. And our son was planned. And not one time can I say that I considered I should be married before I had my child, because that's not the family dynamic that I was brought into.
Right.
But my father talked so much about that foundation of friendship because my mother and he had that.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched that. I saw that when the relationship didn't work, they still knew how to have this unconditional care and love for each other in order to show up for me.
Right.
So I knew how to repeat that because that was my situation.
For sure.
Now, if my dad would have said, marry the person you have a child by, I am positive that's what mission I would have been on.
No doubt.
Positive.
No doubt.
Then he also said, so I had to go to college. No choice on that. And I had to graduate college before I could have a kid. And my college graduation was December 19th, and my son was born December 18th. I made it.
Yes. And Dad is more proud. More proud, right?
Right. But so I say all of that to say, we also pour these things into our kids that don't necessarily fit what their life needs to be, or we're, repeating, again, the cycle of things. I'm grateful that I have this long life of friendship with my son's father, and we can, recount these things, and he can look at pictures of us growing up, and thank God we have all of that because we don't have wedding photos.
Right.
You know what I mean? So he has at least some foundation that he knows he came from. He came from love. Right. But we tell our children so much in these stories of what our own relationships were that make it difficult for them to move into finding love. What do you see in that space of like people carrying that baggage?
Yeah, no, that's super good. And that's the first time I've heard it from that perspective, but it's the exact same. So for every smart, ambitious woman who was taught, go to school, get a job, so you don't need a man. She's living that life, right? And I remember specifically having that conversation with my, I call him Todd, the other dad. So he's my best friend's dad. And it was the same conversation we had. And because he would always tell his daughter, and his daughter is actually the reason I ended up in engineering school. But he was always, you guys go to school, get good grades, get a job so you can take care of yourself. Right? His daughter went on to be an engineer at NASA. I went on to be an engineer in the food industry. But one day he and I were just talking, and he was like, where are my grandbabies is what he asked. And I was like, Dad, what? And he was like, I thought by now, I was like, you never told us that you wanted us to have it. He was like, what do you mean I never told you? He was like, I thought you would just figure out that. And I was like, you know what? The truth is we'd have figured out how to get A's on our own. Had you told us that that it was all, I was like, you could have just as easily said, go to school, meet a great man, have a happy marriage, and raise beautiful kids. We would have done that too. I was like, we did what you asked us to do. So similarly is recognizing that as you are giving direction to your children, make sure what you're painting is the outcome, not the process.
Yes.
So if you want them to be happy, healthy, satisfied, find a great partner, tell them that. They'll figure out how to get there, because if you don't, they will do what you instruct them to do. Because as young people, you don't have any context. You don't know to add any. So it's like, and same thing with my father that I grew up with said the same thing. And I was like, you guys, my mom used to tease me. And then she would call me like, where are you at? I'm like, Barnes & Noble. I love Barnes & Noble. Sorry for putting that on the show. Barnes & Noble definitely support this podcast. But she called me one day and she was like, where are you? It's like a Saturday. I was like, I'm at Barnes & Noble. She's like, why are you at Barnes & Noble? I was like, this is the outcome of keep your mind on books, not on boys.
Right.
And she was like, I was like, this is what you taught me. I was like, so now I love bookstores. And and I'm having to learn how to learn and love boys. I was like, but you trained me to love books.
To do something completely different.
I do. And so anyway, so all of that to say is that for many, and this again is like I said, what I do as a coach is that it's helping unearth these hidden contracts, as I like to call them, that we're fulfilling. And you don't even realize you're fulfilling them. And until you do, you will fulfill the contract you agreed to, because as a kid, you decided, I'm going to make them proud. I'm going to do something. And you are living that life out, whether you realize it or don't. And until you do, and until you cancel some of the agreements, because by the way, the parents don't remember it. They don't remember any of the discussion. They like, I didn't tell you that. You're like, yes, you did.
My dad said to me that there are 3 things you should never feel: shame, fear, or guilt. And if you feel one of the 3 of those things, whatever you did or whatever situation you're in is wrong for you. And I live by that. I wrote it in my book. I tell people this all the time because it resonates so much with me when he said that. And then he said, when did I say that to you?
Exactly.
I was like, huh?
It's your whole life
You don't
story.
remember?
It's the foundational guidance of your life. And he's like, I didn't,
What?
did we? That's exactly right. Because they're not trying to plant these things. They really are just talking. They were not that foresight. They did not have. But you hold on to, and then you're like, oh my God. Never mind the fact that fear is a human. It's biological, right? We come to the earth with it. And so like now I'm denying my humanity because I'm trying to live up to somebody else's expectations that I interpreted. And it's okay to be willing. And that's like, so that's what I love about the work I do as the Love Engineer. It's like, it's helping people again, design, build, and maintain. And some of it is understanding. It's like, okay, let's talk about the foundation you're currently dealing with. And it's until you identify that where you go, oh, wait, this is holding all of my behaviors together.
Yeah.
And if I take it out, believe it or not, you'll still be stable, but I get to put a different material there that'll support me in a better way.
Yeah.
And that's usually what it is. It's like you got to pick a different belief or perspective that'll support you in creating the life you want as an adult, because that was the one, like your parents were just trying to make sure you survived to adulthood.
Right. Like, girl, don't be doing no crazy shit, okay?
They like, just make it to adulthood.
If you're scared and if you feel ashamed and you feel guilty, just don't
get out
do
of that.
It.
Because and from his lens to protect my daughter, that's exactly right. Not as a staple for the guiding post of your life.
Right, like he didn't know how much I was going to use that. Like, and
he don't even remember it.
Dad, I love you. Shout out to
Dad.
To
we
dad.
Love you. We love you, Dad.
Mr. Floyd.
And that's really it, is recognizing that intent and impact are two different things.
Absolutely.
And in our relationships, similarly with communication, with words, sometimes what we intend and the impact of that intent are different things. And be willing to explore that, because whether you realize it or don't, it is having an impact, even if it's uncommunicated.
Yeah. So I want to talk to women that I think are always looking for ways to improve themselves. They claim to be very empowered. They love to read. They're researching things. They probably have a membership to master's class. They're on YouTube all night. I'm talking about myself. Yeah. And they're watching all of this stuff about, how to be amazing. They're reading, they're doing all this great stuff, pouring into themselves all the time. And but then also feeling like the role of being a mother is so important that I can't do this dating, or I can't do falling in love. I can't do that just yet. I've got to hold off because I've got to focus on my role as a mother, or this role, in terms of what my career is, my profession. I've slowly gotten out of that space, but I remember being in that space where it was just like the most important thing to me is being a great mother and making sure that I'm amazing at my job so that I can afford the things that we need. And that became my identity for a long time. So how do we talk to those single moms that are feeling stuck in that space? They know they want a partner. They know they want love. They know they'd be better in terms of their own wellness. They know their energy in their home would feel better if they had that. But they're sacrificing that so that they can be a good mom.
Yeah. It's one, like I said, it's one recognizing and telling yourself the truth, right? So we all, many people like, oh, I don't like liars, but we lie to ourselves all day, every day. And so that would be my first thing. It's like to stop telling the lie, because it's no different than the religious one, right? Where it's like, I'm gonna get myself together, then I'm going to church. Yeah. And so I invite, and the thing that I personally found that I had to do, because, and I think as I told you, it's like when it comes to this masterpiece called your life, you are in the frame.
Yep.
You need somebody who's in the gallery. And that's where I was like, I'm a big fan of coaches next to whether that's the love engineer or somebody else. Get you somebody you can trust that can help point you to the path, especially if you never learn how to love. Because not even some of it, all of it, there's nothing wrong with you. I think that's the piece I wanted to make sure that everybody learned. There's nothing wrong with you. You just didn't learn ever how to do it properly. Yeah. It's kind of like the, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, right? It's one of those, just like if you never teach a kid the alphabet, that kid does not learn to read. Same thing. If you don't ever learn the foundations of a healthy relationship, if you don't learn the foundations of communication and conflict, while you may go through and be in a bunch of relationships, it does not mean you'll learn how to read it. And so self-study is one thing. And, people talk about experience the best teacher. I disagree wholeheartedly in the sense that you can learn how to love and build great relationships. One is it's a learning curve. And many times we're learning it in a relationship, which is one classroom of itself. And it's a difficult one at times, right? Like you'll never learn more about yourself ever than when you're in a relationship with somebody. 100%. You will never learn more. However, you may not be, it's like, you'll get the chance. Lessons are available. Learning is optional. And so the lessons are always there. And so being willing to put past the ego and to not defer, because many people, again, they hide behind the things they control. You can control parenting. You can control work.
Yes.
You cannot control another person in relationships. So then it becomes easier, like, oh, get to that. Get to that when. But the bigger piece is realizing that you deserve to love and be loved. And more than that, you are lovable.
Yes, you deserve it. Now, the co-parenting confessions moment of this show for me is lessons are available. Learning is optional. That is so real. Even if in the co-parenting space, if you can just be strong enough and present enough, intentional enough to admit that the lessons are there. And whether or not you learn from what has happened, that is completely up to you.
It's totally optional.
It is completely optional. That is good.
But the catch, though, I'll add to that is that while that is certainly true, is the reality is that if you don't get the lesson, you may get a different class. Not even you'll get a different class and a new teacher, but it'll be the same lesson.
Yes.
That's all. You keep dating the same person. You keep attracting the same person. You're like, wait a minute. Because even in my own world, I remember I was like, why do I feel like I'm dating Charles? And I dated Charles in Chicago. I dated Charles in California. I dated Charles in Iowa. I dated this. I was like, why is this? And it was like, oh, wait. It is a new class and a different teacher, but the same lesson. And so it is important that you do get the lessons, because you don't move on. It's kind of like school, literally, where it's like, oh no, you don't learn to multiply. You'll be back in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Even if you switch schools.
Right. You are who you are.
New teacher.
No matter where you go.
Here you are. And those lessons be like, it'll keep showing up for you.
I got to say that again, you are who you are no matter where you go, because
you are who you are, period. Yeah.
Listen,
everywhere you go.
The other thing that people say is, now we're in Minnesota, for those watching the podcast that don't, or listening to the podcast also that don't know that. And people will say, oh girl, the men aren't here. So if you want to find love, you need to go to, right, all these other places. And then people they jump
and
ship.
move.
They move thinking, I'm going to go find love someplace else, and don't ever get the lesson.
No. And they get there and they're equally single in Texas, equally single in Atlanta, equally single in Chicago, and Charlotte, equally single. Why? Because they've not learned how to love. More than that, they've not learned how to attract it. And that's my thing as a love engineer. It's like, I don't teach you you don't have to go find anything. It's like, you don't have to chase what you can attract. And many people don't understand that. It's like, you don't have to chase it. But if you, again, in the spirit of control, it feels better to have to chase it. It's better to find it, because that supports the mindset of many single parents, is that I get to control something.
Yeah.
But what if I don't have to?
What if you don't have to have control? Now, single mothers, if that's not like one of the first things that will probably make them all cringe, right? It's like, what?
I gotta control my world, and I'm here for it because know that I love you, just in general.
Yeah.
Okay, but as like I
Yeah.
said, as a low gender pill, it's like I'm not on the side of women. I'm not on the side of men. I'm on the side of love. And
Yes.
everybody deserves
To
to
be
love
loved.
and
Everybody
be loved.
does. Yes.
And to have a life that they truly love.
Yeah.
And it's hard to have that when you are afraid and therefore you're being driven.
Yes, I love it. You know, the other thing I think about is I had my family on the show, my son's father and my son. And one of the things that my son mentioned was not having a memory of his father and I showing each other any type of affection. And he's like, of course, I knew you guys loved each other and y'all slept in the same room and we did things as a family, but I don't have a real memory of you guys showing each other that love and, in that way. And that had me so messed up for probably about 2 weeks where I kept replaying that. And so what I will share as a single woman, that it affected me in such a way because I thought to myself, my son deserved to see somebody love me. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, like I could almost cry right now saying it. Because for 2 whole weeks, I was like, has he not seen anybody like show me love outside of my immediate family? And so, I was like, kept coming at like, so tell me, let's talk about this again. Let's talk about till we finally got to the point where he was like, oh no. So there's, a guy that I dated for a couple of years. And he's like, I saw him show you affection. I saw him do that, but I didn't see it from my dad. So then I was kind of like, whew, okay. Because I almost felt terrible to think that I had deprived my son of seeing me be loved.
And I think that's the other thing I'll interject here because it's probably not just you, but there's other things.
Absolutely.
Take off that responsibility.
Yeah.
Like you cannot be the sole supply of every experience this child is going to have, believe it or not.
Yep.
And so there's so often this pressure of perfection. And like I said, we got to make sure this next generation is solid. And Mom, you're doing a phenomenal job, period.
Yes.
And that's the piece that also sets, which is what keeps, I think, many single moms from even dating, the fear of getting it wrong. The fear of getting it wrong, the fear of messing up their child. It's like, let that go. The truth of the matter is that young people are resilient people. How do we know we're here? And we know the stuff we went through. And so in this quest to make sure they're going to be okay, realize that them seeing mistakes is the best thing you can do for them.
I tell people that all the time. This is a big one for single moms where they hide their emotion. You're hurt about something, but you go in your room and you cry, and then all your children ever see is this hard shell of a person who seems to always have it together or figured out. And so then when they have those feelings,
they don't know what to do.
They don't know where to go with it. Right? This hard exterior that I'm getting from my mom. I have a friend who told me that her children had never seen her cry. And
what a travesty.
And she's like, oh, and I'm like, well, so where do you cry? And she literally told me I would go to my car and cry because I felt like it would hurt them to see me
human.
Thank you. It hurt my heart. Like I probably hugged her for I don't know how long. When she shared that with me.
And we got it honestly. So again, don't take this as anything I'm doing wrong.
Right.
Our mothers didn't cry in front of us either. I remember the day I saw my grandmother cry, and she might have been in her 80s. And that's the piece where it's like we learned this. The cool thing is we can unlearn it, but if it's human and to feel sad, to make mistakes, to cry, to feel shame, guilt, fear, those are human emotions. I don't have to live in them, but to feel them,
you should feel,
that is a reality of living. And the best thing I can do for the next generation is let them see the humanity of it all. And let them know that it's okay to be human, and then let them see you keep moving forward and bouncing back. But this notion of I have to disconnect from a part of myself makes it also difficult to be in relationships, because the same part that you're hiding from your children that you don't want them to see is also the same part you think your partner is not going to want to see either. So you don't trust anybody with you. including the people that came from you.
Yep. So you're not really showing who you are.
Ever.
Like,
and
it's
you're
crazy.
afraid to do so. And so that practice, not for the sake of the kids, for the sake of you, is that if you really want to be loved, I mean, like the number of people's like, I want somebody to be real. I want somebody to be honest. It's like, but you lie consistently. How? And that's why you can't trust anybody else, because you know you lie a lot.
Yeah.
You know you aren't true. You know you aren't. So the fastest way to get to an honest person is for you to show up true.
Yeah. That's real. And again, I mean, the biggest message that you're sharing is about what you attract. That is it.
You only attract what you are. No matter what you want, you attract who you are. So people's like, I only attract men who liars. I'm like, then you might want to look within and understand where you're lying to yourself. I only attract people who not committed. Yep. So reflect within. Because again, like I said, they come with a lesson.
Girl, I had to get real with myself. Like, I was like, okay, so how do I keep attracting this same asshole?
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an asshole.
Yeah. And as long as you admit that, it's like, okay, and I don't want to be that, or I do.
Or I do. And then
I'm okay.
Right? But you know, it's you're right. And I know for myself, I kept attracting the same asshole.
You will only attract who you are. You can't attract differently.
And girl, because I was not getting the lesson.
Right.
I wasn't getting the lesson.
That's true.
So now it's like, guess
and now you got it. You don't attract them anymore, do you?
Got the lesson. I have learned. And I have moved on.
And you get a different guy that shows up and you didn't do anything. And that is the power of love engineering.
Yeah.
Is that it's not hard. As I say all the time, it's not hard work, it's heart work. And if you change the frequency and the energy that's coming from your heart, you also change who is attracted to your heart.
Yep. I love this message so much because it is so similar to the stuff that I share with co-parents. It's like, if you expect this person to always be late, to not care about how you feel, to disrespect you repeatedly and over, if you're looking for that, that is what you're going to get. And at some point, you have to want to see that person differently, especially if they're interacting with you. They're trying to be present for their child. You have to give them the opportunity to show up different. Now, some people are going to disappoint you, and that's okay. But be okay with being willing to see things different.
Yep. And being okay with willing to improve the behaviors within yourself that make you look for that in somebody else. Because again, everything we're projecting onto another person, even if it is their experience, as my first lady used to say, if you spot it, you got it.
Okay.
So while disappointing me, letting me down, maybe the hallmarks of my interaction with them, but if I'm willing to sit with it, I can also point to you the number of times I let myself down.
Yeah.
That I didn't admit.
Yep.
Or the times I didn't show up for myself. And that's the catch when it's internal, back to being in the frame. You don't see it because you're only looking out.
Yes. Let's talk, as we wrap up, about what are some of the things that single mothers in particular are projecting that might repel good men? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because we know that it's about what you should be, how to attract, and you're changing your mindset so that you can attract the right things. But there's some things that a lot of mothers are projecting. And I saw this post on Facebook that makes me think of that, because there was a laundry list of things that felt, when you read it, like absolute insults to single mothers. But then when you go back and read it again, there's this realization that this is a truth for a lot of women. So, being unavailable, putting your children first. Your children are always a priority.
Yeah.
There was something, you have no time to date, because I'm just too busy, right? You're always at work, or you're doing things for your kids. And there was a laundry list. I can't think of everything, but it just makes me know that there are a lot of things that, as we're overachieving and we're trying really hard to be great mothers, we're saying one thing, but we're also projecting something different. Anything about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. So it's being back to the honesty with yourself, because oftentimes the busyness, and I say it with single women, period, mothers or not, it's just that, again, it's like, look at what you say you want and then look at what your activities does.
Yeah.
And so it's where do I prioritize it? If I prioritize a partner, because there's nothing wrong with having my kids as a priority, because I can hear somebody like, my kids are a priority.
Yeah.
Your kids are a priority, and your heart and your love should be one as well.
Absolutely.
Right. And so this notion of, is that, am I a priority?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do I add myself to that? Because again, the healthiest thing you can do for any child is for you to be healthy, as opposed to being a martyr in motherhood.
Girl, they ate me up on TikTok when I talked about needing to do things for yourself as a woman and not always prioritizing your children, and just that whole oxygen mask, philosophy. Like, you cannot save your children on the plane, right, until you put the oxygen mask on you first. And so there are a lot of women that are, I think also it's a defense mechanism. They're really afraid
to take care of themselves.
Yes. To take care of themselves, because again, there's this victim mentality. I have to always, my identity is tied around being the busy person, being the mom that's at every, football, basketball game, being the mom that's at every dance, recital and practice and, rehearsal and all of this. And if I stop doing some of those things, even if I relieve myself from some of those duties and actually let my co-parent show up for me, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. And not even show up for you, show up for the child that they have.
Yep.
And so to remove yourself from being the center stage, because that's the other play that people don't realize. It's like this notion of that I do everything is a covert way of being incredibly self-centered. It's so I get to be the hero in my child's life. I get to be the superstar to my friends or whomever it is. But more than that, I also get to override this internal feeling of dissatisfaction and frustration. Because if I am not busy, then I do have time to reflect on the fact that I actually feel like a failure.
Yep. And there's so many women that stay just steeped and rooted in that role of mom. Yeah. Not just single mom, but the role of mom.
Motherhood. Yeah.
To avoid all of the other stuff about who you are outside of that role.
Actually are. Outside of the role.
Like, girl.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to tell me, get you some business.
A lot of it. And business really, meaning like be still. So that's my thing. It's like be still. But it's realizing that the emotions and all that stuff's going to come up. That's why I said every adult should go see Inside Out too. I'm not getting paid for every adult. Should go see it so you can deal with the emotions that come behind it.
I'm a huge fan of this
movie. But more than that is more about being able to decide what's the best version of me. And being able to go forward, knowing that I deserve, and this is back to deserve. I deserve a life of pleasure. I deserve a life I love, and I deserve to share that love with someone else. And more than that, believing and knowing that there's somebody who really wants to share it with you.
Right. There is a person, right?
There are people. There's plenty of people. Yeah, plenty of people who want to share it with you.
Thank you. This was so good. This was so good. I loved this conversation. And just as a reminder, as we're wrapping up, as Alex mentioned today, you deserve to be loved. So all of the single mothers out there that are tied up in their role and the responsibility of being a mother, do not forget about yourself. It is so important to allow your children to see you be loved, but not own that. They're going to have experiences in the world. You don't have to provide all of them. We've learned that today. There are lessons. They will be there, but whether or not you learn is up to you. Thank you so much for tuning into Co-Parenting Confessions. We will be back. Like and subscribe. Love ya. Bye.
No relation to NBC.